Updates.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Really excited for the Fireside chat that we have here today. First, let me introduce myself. So my name's Kyle Boston. I'm a partner with Spaulding Ridge. I lead our Salesforce practice. Spaulding Ridge is the strategic advisor and Salesforce implementation partner to Definitive Healthcare. So I had a front seat to the excellent story and experience that you're about to hear today. Trust me, you're in for a treat. You're going to be hearing from two really incredible people. Today, we're going to be speaking about really the market trends and a bit of the spotlight to what is Salesforce Revenue Cloud. So you're going to be hearing from Salesforce, as well as hearing from our client, Definitive Healthcare, and their journey with Salesforce CPQ. And then we'll finish with what our role was as a strategic advisor and an implementation partner. And then we'll finish with an open question forum as well. So today your presenters are David from Definitive Healthcare, Chief Growth Officer. As I mentioned, really an innovator, but also innovating on Salesforce as well. And then Rob Negosian, VP Revenue Cloud, executive in sales leadership at Salesforce, and also really responsible for the client success as well. So with that, I'll pass it to Rob. Rob, would you please kick us off?
Sure. Thanks, Kyle. Again, my name is Rob Negosian. I'm a Vice President of Sales in Salesforce's Commercial Revenue Cloud business. About to celebrate my 5th anniversary at Salesforce. But I was actually part of the CPQ and billing world prior to joining Salesforce. I was part of the SteelBrick team that was acquired by Salesforce in February 2016. And in the past 5 years, I've seen some absolutely incredible growth of our solutions and the way that we've been helping customers in that time period. You know, we've really developed the CPQ solution much further so that it's a full enterprise-ready solution that has all of the trust and customer success principles that Salesforce customers expect from any of our solutions. During that time, we've invested heavily to ensure that all of our customers are on an upgrade path to ensure that they're on the latest and greatest functionality. About 3 years ago, we released our billing solution that allows our customers to invoice and collect a number of different revenue transaction types. And most recently, we announced the release of Salesforce Revenue Cloud. And I'm here to chat a little bit about that today. Don't worry, I'm fully aware that most of us are here to hear from David about his experience directly with Salesforce CPQ at Definitive Healthcare. But I thought, maybe it made sense to introduce everyone, especially anyone who is less familiar with Revenue Cloud. So I just have a couple of quick slides to take us through. Okay, so the story of Revenue Cloud, we really have to go back a year. And, I doubt very many of us really want to rehash 2020. We're all happy to be in 2021. But, in 2020, it was a year of change unlike any other in recent memory. Some of our customers saw their revenue stall, while others saw business boom. But throughout 2020, we collected a ton of feedback from our customers. And one of the things that we heard was that B2B buyers' expectations have been changing. One of the things that they're looking for are flexible offerings. So it might be a one-time purchase. It might be more of a license or SaaS solution. But we're seeing more and more customers pivot into a pay-as-you-go or usage model or that they're expecting to see. Something else we've heard is that consumers are spending a lot more time shopping online, and that B2B buyer is seeking similar expectations. Things like browsing online catalogs, being able to request a quote, and work with a sales rep who has context with that customer's interest based on their online activities. And then one of the other things that we've heard is that it's all about speed. When B2B buyers are ready to buy, they want to quote immediately. If they have a question about their invoice, they want that answered now. Chrissy, if we could pivot to the next slide. But it's hard to keep pace with all these changing expectations. Revenue is processed through a series of siloed people, processes, and systems. And all these, this network of solutions is often duct taped together. But we know our customers, this hasn't occurred by design. It's a byproduct of the evolution that we were discussing. Maybe our customers are looking to add a partner channel to complement their direct sales team. Maybe they've acquired a couple of companies and inherited their differing go-to-market strategies. Maybe they pivoted to a subscription or usage model that led them to create a siloed billing system or separate product catalogs. Whatever it is, we know that the complexity of the back end makes it harder to focus on customer success. And it makes it even more difficult to ensure the accuracy of revenue data, which has to be 100% accurate because it's reported to investors. So how do we balance growth and governance? How do we ensure that we're setting a best path for our customers while balancing back-end systems and how they handle the business as we want to run it? Introduce Revenue Cloud. Salesforce identified the need for Revenue Cloud, a solution that closed the gap between customer expectations and back-end capabilities. Revenue Cloud can help support your direct sale efforts while opening up revenue growth opportunities across partner channels or maybe even digital commerce. And unlike other solutions, Revenue Cloud benefits from the power of the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, which puts the customer at the center of every transaction, whether that's direct sales, partner channel, digital commerce, or an experience that seamlessly blends all of them together. And in doing so, we can eliminate the number of point solutions by introducing a unified product catalog, a flexible billing engine, and system integrator partners who can help reduce the time needed to bring innovation to market. We can leverage Salesforce's core competencies to gain real-time visibility into valuable KPIs like customer lifetime value, net revenue retention, and monthly recurring revenue. And we can integrate to an ERP. Revenue Cloud is not a replacement for your ERP, but it will complement your ERP to drive better customer engagement. If you have any questions about any of the concepts or ideas that I've discussed today, we will make sure to answer those later on. But for now, I think we all would like to hear from David at Definitive Healthcare. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Kyle, and we can pivot over to hearing from David.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Really appreciate that. I think that's a great background from a product standpoint. As we learn next, we'll hear about how David took advantage of CPQ for Definitive Healthcare, helping solve their key problems and really scaling their business as well. So David, take it away. Thank you again.
Oh, my pleasure. So my goal here is to share Definitive's year-long CPQ journey in the hopes that it helps you think about your own path. But I think it would be helpful if you understand a bit more about our organization to put the story in context. So let me breeze through a few high-level points. Our CEO founded Definitive in 2011. We have around 500 FTEs. We're based in Framingham, Massachusetts. We're private equity backed. More importantly, as it relates to our CPQ story, are the customers we serve. We have thousands of customers across a variety of verticals, biopharma, medtech, all the way through staffing and recruiting. And the variety of customers isn't limited just to our verticals. It's also about the size of our customers. So we have those customers who have fewer than 10 employees and those who have over 100,000. And that makes for quite a bit of complexity. And as you think about that through the lens of pricing, you'll see why that can be a challenge. Our solution we have a variety of solutions, but essentially we are a healthcare data and software as a service provider. We surface insights and analytics across a variety of things, hospital profiles, Medicare and commercial claims, et cetera. The bottom line is our customers are those folks who are trying to commercialize their goods and services into the healthcare space. So with that as a backdrop, let me tell you the first part of our story. Next slide. Awesome. So I joined Definitive through an acquisition, and I took on the role of leading transformations. If you're familiar at all with the private equity model, then you're familiar with this type of a role. A few months before I joined, however, Definitive had just entered into their relationship with Advent, and our new board of directors and our ELT collectively believed that there was an opportunity to drive value through pricing. At the time, our pricing was a simple grid that, although was routinely updated, the underlying structure and thinking was fundamentally unchanged since, in fact, the company was founded. And as the new guy, my job was to lead this effort to define a new pricing strategy and build out the overall pricing function. Certainly, it was trial by fire. Next slide. There we go. So to kick off this effort, we hired a very well-known pricing strategy consulting firm, and they spent thousands of hours of their time, and we spent hundreds of hours of our time over the next 4 months. And as a result, we ended up with a good, better, best structure for each of our 3 main verticals. So that means that we had 9 packages and 9 pricing curves, quite a bit more sophisticated than the Excel grid we started with. When we started the consulting project, to be very honest, CPQ wasn't something we ever thought of. And quite frankly, it wasn't even something we discussed until the last month of the project. But by the end of that project, it was entirely clear that we needed to introduce a system to implement this new sophisticated pricing strategy. Now, bear in mind that this is all happening in the midst of COVID. And our need to implement a CPQ, as I highlighted before, wasn't something we thought about and therefore wasn't even in our budget. So as you think about that, your imagination of the discussions we had are probably serving you correctly. In the end, we did decide to proceed, but there was no room for error. We had to get it right. And getting it right starts with picking the right partners. So we kicked off a vendor selection process that lasted about 2 months. First, we identified about half a dozen potential vendors. And after talking with them, we found that really only 2 met our requirements. We spent the next month working with both of those vendors to deep dive into their solutions, understand their pricing, the total cost of ownership, and we met with their recommended implementation partners. In the end, we obviously selected Salesforce CPQ for several key reasons, beside the fact that it actually met all of our requirements. First of all, it obviously has a really neat integration into Salesforce CRM, which is what we use. That was really important to us. And in addition to that, it was actually easier to maintain and update. So collectively, we felt that it was the best future-proofed solution for us. Look, we're not in the business of supporting systems. We just want it to work and it needs to work well. And we were most confident in this combination. But beyond the system itself, beyond the CPQ, we actually felt most comfortable with the implementation partner that Salesforce recommended. They had the scale and the experience that gave us really comfort to move forward. And so Spaulding Ridge was a really big part of our overall decision. And quite frankly, both the Spaulding Ridge and Salesforce teams worked really well with us to make sure that we can find a path that worked, given the fact that this was a COVID-based surprise expense. So they were great. So then it comes time to have the rubber meet the road. And I assembled a cross-functional team of, quite frankly, the best folks we have, true rock stars, to focus on this implementation. But in fairness, none of them have ever implemented a CPQ system before. And so we relied heavily on Spaulding Ridge's expertise. This became immediately evident as soon as we received their kickoff workbook, which highlighted several areas, quite frankly, we hadn't thought about. As a result, we actually stopped the implementation clock, put that on hold, circled our wagons for around 2 weeks, and addressed those unknowns, and then we re-engaged, now fully prepared. In the end, we implemented our CPQ, which facilitated pricing for 9 packages, 9 pricing curves, coding, contracting, advanced approvals, Adobe Sign, And we did it for 200 users and 5 personas. And the best part is we did it on time and on budget. But that's not really the end of the story. Of course, we have to launch it. And we did that in early October. So we launched our program. We did about a 1 to 2 week boot camp for our entire commercial organization, followed by extensive post-training support throughout Q4. And during Q4, all of our new deals went through CPQ, and the feedback from the sales org was surprisingly positive, despite a few foreseeable friction points, of course. Now, as we look back on our first quarter of what we call post-CPQ, we discovered some really interesting results. Well, operationally, we can create powerful and consistent quotes faster than ever. And in fact, we've clocked it at around 90 seconds to create a quote. And we can track and analyze discounting, which is hugely interesting to us. Although in the early days, although we're still in early days, we've already observed around a 10 to 11% improvement in ACV between legacy quotes and new quotes that occurred in Q4. But finally, and quite frankly, most surprisingly, we regard CPQ, even in these early days, as an essential part of our overall commercial operations. So with the benefit of hindsight and realizing that you're on the other side of the looking glass from where we are now, I'd like to offer some key takeaways as you consider your own paths forward. So first, resolve your pricing before implementing a new CPQ. Look, it doesn't have to be perfect, and quite frankly, it never will be. But if you're anticipating a major change in your pricing or your packaging, then lead with that and then follow a CPQ. Second, select your CPQ through the lens of value and total cost of ownership, not year one price. Like your CRM, your CPQ will be with you for a long while. So consider which solution will serve you for years to come. Third, if you've never implemented a CPQ, like us, get good help. Don't do it on your own. Doing it on your own is like doing surgery on yourself. We had a great experience with Spaulding Ridge, and quite frankly, it's because they embraced our goals, our timeline, and our budget as if it was their own. They functioned in a highly collaborative manner, which made them feel like an extension of our team. My advice to you is don't accept anything less when you're considering your own implementation partner. Fourth, don't lose sight of the organizational change. Successfully implementing a CPQ requires alignment and support across your entire organization. In our case, between our project teams, our project pilots, our key executive stakeholders, when we rolled all together, about 10% of our entire organization was involved with this project prior to launch. Part of it was to sensitize them, but at the end of the day, remember, one of my favorite quotes is, "Success has many parents while failure is an orphan." And we wanted to share that project with as many people as possible. Fifth, once it goes live, treat your CPQ like it was, in fact, your own product. After all, it creates value. It has customers. It has users. It requires training. It has release cycles, requires maintenance and customer support. And my advice is it needs to be appropriately resourced post-launch so that it can continue to drive value and support your commercial needs. And then finally, our year-long journey began with the goal of creating value through pricing commercial scale. That's why we kicked off the big effort. But quite frankly, a deeper understanding of our discounting practices, optimizing our pricing curves, rethinking our packaging, and looking at those factors by sales teams, vertical and customer sizes, that level of analytical power we did not think about or anticipate going into it, but now we've grown reliant upon. So is something that can really accelerate your fact-based decision-making. So that's just a quick overview of some key takeaways. And with that, I'll hand it over to Kyle.
Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you, David and Rob, for sharing both those perspectives. As we wait for questions to come in and address those, I thought it was pertinent to maybe just share a little bit about Spaulding Ridge, just briefly. So Spaulding Ridge, as I mentioned, strategic advisor and Salesforce implementation partner to Definitive Healthcare. From our standpoint, we are specialists around the quote to cash process, but holistically, we're a global consultancy with over 200 plus consultants that really helps organizations solve root problems stemming from the office of the CFO, or when they're trying to connect front office and back office process and technology. So unifying sales operations with the back office. We implement best-in-cloud solutions, obviously here today talking to you about Salesforce, but also industry-leading solutions like Anaplan for planning, budgeting, and forecasting, OneStream for close consolidation, reconciliation, document and contract lifecycle management solutions such as DocuSign, and also procurement software such as Coupa. From our standpoint, we really look to lead with advisory first, and then look to build tailored implementations and scalable solutions for our clients like we did for Definitive Healthcare. So with that, let's maybe move to a few questions. There's a few things that stood out in hearing both of you speak. And one of those is, it's not always rainbows and unicorns, right, David? So, even when you have a successful implementation, sometimes there's going to be natural friction points in your organization. So maybe you can share, some of those just so that those on the phone and dialing in, they're probably coming to us at different stages. They might be exploring a CPQ tool. They might be in current implementation. They might even be on the other left side of that and not really understanding if they're ready and in need of a quote to cash solution as well. So maybe you can share from your perspective some things that you faced.
Yeah, happy to. So I think the natural friction points for me come into two categories. So the first one is there's a shift of power. Let's be frank. When you think about a world pre-CPQ, and in our case, it was pricing and discounting was 100% owned by our sales organization. And although our sales leaders were very much a part of our project, and that was in fact one of the key success factors of why we did it so well, there was a need for them to get comfortable with the idea of handing over the reins and building in those sort of processes into their own operations. And quite frankly, that is, I think, entirely predictable at any organization. In our case, we were really blessed with sales folks that were transformation oriented and willing to lean in and kind of move forward. But even with that mindset, it still took some time. And my advice to folks would be, when you're doing this, if you're considering CPQ and your sales organization is not a part of the process, you're gonna have a really hard time making it go live, at least well. So the second thing was agility of change. When your pricing exists on an Excel spreadsheet or something as simple as that, you can change your price with zero implementation time. Just change it and there it is. And doing it in CPQ takes a little bit more time, obviously. And that's something as an organization we're learning, that what we're gaining in scale is a very minor loss in agility. Now, quite frankly, you shouldn't be changing your pricing every day or week anyway, but these are just some of the natural friction points, I call it, because I'm sure everyone who starts off where we are is going to experience that as you go through. But knowing it in advance means you can prepare people's mindsets and align them in a way that gets them comfortable with where you're going to arrive. So that's how I look at it from our point of view.
No, David, I think that's extremely insightful. I often say, the implementation side is sometimes easier than the process side. While communication needs to take place, the process changes, the organizational awareness. So, I know us as a partner, we really try to work with you as well to really advise on, why are you implementing, not what are you implementing? And I think that's really important for organizations to really take as they look in from discovery into the implementation and build is, yes, we're implementing Salesforce. There's an extreme amount of power and flexibility with the platform, but also how does our organization become ready? So thank you for sharing that. There's a question that did come in that I think is probably a tag on to that too, which is, I think even before you start implementation or post for that matter, what is your thought around investing in a Salesforce resource, someone skilled or specialty in, maybe certified in that product or in that discipline as you look to scale? And then maybe you can share from your perspective where they might sit, whether it's IT, whether it's Sometimes it's sales ops or enablement. Maybe share your perspective.
It's a great question. So we actually just hired our first Salesforce specialist earlier this year, prior to us implementing our CPQ. He's a great guy, and actually, as a surprise, he went on his own and got certified in CPQ. So it was a pleasant surprise to our team. He's a really great guy. But if the question is, do you need it? From my point of view, I couldn't imagine not having him around. Right. And so, and quite frankly, it's not just one person. We have a few people who are helping us out. But the reason why that's so important is because you want to own it. You really want to own it. You want to be able to make changes. And there are times, and Kyle, as you know, that we're still making some big changes, and sometimes we do need a little bit of adult supervision in some of those areas. But you don't want to be dependent on. Sorry, Kyle. You don't want to be dependent on an external partner for every little thing. And I think having a degree of autonomy is something that is afforded to you when you have that in-house specialization. In our case, I can't tell you what's best practice, but I can tell you what works for us. That person works in our sales ops organization, and for us, it works great.
I think oh, go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to add on that, that is the vision of Salesforce CPQ and Salesforce Revenue Cloud, is that scalability and the ability to maintain that in-house. Your pricing, you've put a lot of effort into the packaging of solutions, but I bet when we check in next year or the year after, there are going to be some tweaks made, some changes after you've leveraged that information that comes out of a year of quoting in Salesforce. You're going to see discounting trends, margin trends, add-ons, upgrades, things like that. It will naturally lead you to wanting to potentially pivot. And that's part of, that's part of something that we highlight in every evaluation is, on one side, CPQ is inherently complex. However, Salesforce CPQ is completely built on native functionality within Salesforce. It's all productized. The idea here is that you're not hard coding a solution with Apex code early on that you're going to need to unwind later. Everything is implemented in a declarative fashion with checkboxes, drop-down menus, related lists, the standard Salesforce administrative experience. So, if you have that Salesforce administrative background, everything looks very familiar to you and allows those changes to be made by the appropriate administrator without having to call in Spaulding Ridge or another SI every time you want to tweak your path forward through CPQ. And if anyone's in an evaluation right now, that's something that we'd certainly like to highlight to the right audience. Of course, a salesperson would never need to see the back end of CPQ, but anyone with Salesforce administrative experience would probably be really excited to see the way that the solution is set up on the back end.
Rob, can I add one thing to that?
Sure.
In our case, we were going to hire a Salesforce administrator anyway, because we run Salesforce as our CRM. And so when this person, became certified in CPQ, we got that benefit. We did not add a headcount, just to be clear. So we have one person who's supporting both ends of that that platform spectrum and doing an amazing job. So the question is, should you have the resource? You should. And if you already have Salesforce, then you probably should already have an administrator, in which case you may not even need to add budget. But the control you get is totally worth it.
I think those are both really insightful answers there. I think when an implementation is done correct, you should see diminishing consulting spend. You should be more enabled. You should have more documentation. Your team should feel more empowered and confident. There's an organizational awareness that's there as well, that they're excited, and you have usability and acceptance of the solution. And then you have the power of the Salesforce platform that makes it, we've stayed 80% out of the box. There might be some organizational tweaks to the platform that make up that 20%, but ultimately it's a very scalable solution to then manage yourselves as well. So thank you for both for that. As we have more questions coming in, let's go to the next slide. I think As we wait, I think it'd be great also, David, to hear from you. What was it that set Salesforce apart? You mentioned that you went through a rigorous evaluation. There was multiple vendors that you evaluated. I'm sure they were both what you would call kind of point solutions or modules, all the way to larger platforms. Some of them might even have been industry plays as well, but help us understand what was it that Salesforce kind of did and how it set itself apart.
Yeah. So, like I said, we did 2 rounds of vendor evaluation. The first time, it was a little bit of a dog and pony show, just sort of seeing who were the most likely candidates. But we really double clicked into Salesforce and one other. And to be fair, both met our requirements. So this wasn't an issue of success versus failure. I mean, they both would work. The question was who would work the best for us. So what really guided our thinking was we wanted a long-term solution, right? It needed to be something that made sense today and tomorrow and beyond, because we've had Salesforce for years, and I assume whatever CPQ we're going to implement will also be around for years. I'll also point out that in the context of our CPQ journey, which we call our pricing journey, it was a very tough year, right? That's obvious. But the idea of going out of budget and making this type of investment really took a lot of faith from our leadership team. And the idea, the simple fear that we would have to undo that in a year or two was just unfathomable. So we needed to make sure that the choices we made now were the choices that would stand by us for the future. And as I mentioned before in my overview, there was a variety of reasons why we thought Salesforce was the best future-proofed option. But if I can offer like one more little anecdote that really sort of highlighted it for us. When we were looking at these 2 options, Salesforce and a competitor, the total cost of ownership in year 1 was roughly the same. But what was interesting to us was that the software cost of the non-Salesforce option was cheaper, and the implementation cost was higher because the hours were higher. In the case of Salesforce, it was the reverse. And we found that to be very peculiar. And you would think at first blush, well, if it's a cheaper year 1 software cost, it'll be cheaper beyond, and that's great. But as we dug into the issue further, what we discovered was that the maintenance cost of the alternative would have just been something that would be hard to predict and unforeseeable, and would tether us to a partner in a way that we may not feel comfortable with over time. We really felt that it was important to borrow from Seinfeld, to be the master of your own domain. And so when we evaluated that, we went to Salesforce, and our account team, knock on wood, was awesome. And they really, really worked with us. But I talk about the total cost of ownership, not the fees. And from a TCO perspective and from a future-proofing perspective, it was very easy for us to make that choice. And we're very happy with it.
Great.
Throw a quick comment in there, Kyle, if I could.
Absolutely.
And I'll try to keep it from being too salesy, but at the beginning, I made a quick reference to the automatic upgrades and a number of other enhancements. When we talk to customers and talk about what has been the development of this solution and where are we going in the future, we talk about features and functionality. But one thing that doesn't get a ton of attention that really should is that our customers are now receiving push-up updates 3 times per year on the same schedule as the core Salesforce CRM solution. And we know that when CPQ is being implemented, it's not the end all be all. So all these other solutions on there, they're either being hard coded or you're stuck in the release. So as you're growing and as your business requirements are changing, maybe that vendor is upgrading their solution. However, you can't leverage it because it takes an entire professional services engagement to unwind all the code and re-implement the latest release. Salesforce, you're always on the latest and greatest, and you're benefiting from nonstop development of our solution 3 times a year. And that's huge. We talk about that is we want the time to value. We want you to be up and running immediately. And we don't want any downtime. CPQ is an incredibly important part of anyone's business. And if you get interrupted during month end or quarter end because there's an issue, well, that's really impactful on revenue. So I think our customers are very comforted knowing that they have the trust and security that Salesforce is known for, not only in their CRM, but their CPQ solution as well. And as hurdles come up, as they always do with any type of technology implementation, you have the resources that are available to you from Salesforce to support you, as well as a huge network of other customers. And that's what we always want to do is, connect our customers to benefit from the mutual experience. Love to take that further if anybody has any questions later on.
Yeah, no, thank you both for that. I think it goes with the general theme, right, of, being empowered and enabled on a platform that allows you to scale, to really take advantage of, the organizational changes that can happen with, candidly, normally technology implementations, especially if you look at ERP and some of these other enterprise applications, there's a significant cost, there's a significant time. And I think that's the interesting and the valuable component of all of this is, David, you mentioned 4 months. I mean, to have the value that you had in the implementation that you did and have CPQ live in 4 months and to be able to take advantage of that, that allows the business to move quicker. That allows you to be able to make investments that aren't technology driven, but organizational driven. So you're not handcuffed. So I do think there's important elements here too to touch on. And next slide. Selfishly, this one's important to me too. But I also think it's important. There's many different options that those on the phone and those that will hear this when it's on demand will evaluate. And there's self-implementation. There's implementation with a partner. There's also a wide range of partners that, also might not be as skilled in some of the domains that are required around quote to cash as well. So, maybe you can just share a little bit about our role and Spaulding Ridge's role in making you successfully launch CPQ. The good and the bad. I mean, I want honesty here for sure.
Well, there's not that much bad. That's why I'm here. But, look, I mentioned before, that if you're thinking about implementing a CPQ and if you've never done it, don't do it alone. I cannot fathom doing it any other way. I mean, look, I have to presume that the majority of folks who are listening to this today are thinking about a CPQ for the first time. And if you're doing that, and which is what we were doing, then you have never implemented it before by definition. And it is just way too complex to do it on your own. And so when I think about, what role did Spaulding Ridge play? I mean, look, they brought two things to the table I think were fantastic. First of all, they were an incredible cultural fit with us and our team. And we functioned truthfully like a joint project team. There just was no cultural division. And when I said before that they accepted our timelines, our budget and our objectives as their own, I mean, that is just 100% the truth. But the second thing is they brought expertise. And bear in mind, we entered into our implementation coming out of a very long and thoughtful strategy consulting project. So we thought we were prepared, and in many ways we were. And I think our Spaulding Ridge partners would highlight just how well prepared we were. But even still, as I mentioned in my previous comments, when we started and got our our kickoff workbook, we looked through it and thought, there's a few things we just didn't even think about. And we put the entire implementation on hold because, again, we were budget constrained and we didn't want to run the clock. And so a few things that occurred to us that we hadn't thought of before, but thanks to Spaulding Ridge, was the fact that if we were going to build in approval chains, now's the time to think about what makes sense and what will be the scalable solution. Our MSAs, we did them manually. It's with many different versions, but it's a system that generates contracts automatically. So we took the time to build a single MSA template. Our products, I mean, we had to put our entire product catalog into the system, and our pricing study, covered the vast majority, but not 100% of the products we sold. And so we need to do some housekeeping just to make sure that we were fully prepared. And, quite frankly, it was their expertise that allowed us to understand and identify those unknown unknowns and turn them into things we could actually change and act upon. And look, even since then, we've made a bunch of changes. Rob said before, eventually you'll make a change. I would tell you that we started making changes in our CPQ almost immediately, because it's just we run a complex business, and you want to tweak things, and you want to play with things, you want to optimize. But in order to do that, what is important is that you start with a strong platform. What we don't want to fix, we want to move forward, right? Looking backwards on a system is just nothing that an executive team wants to talk about, right? You want to drive value, not attend to deferred maintenance. And so, quite frankly, I think we started with a great technology implemented by a great partner, and we don't look back. And I wouldn't want to be in any other position than that.
That's I'm blushing, so thank you for those kind words. We appreciate that, but we live by as a motto for Spaulding Ridge. It's really all business is personal. We want to have that ability to be able to have those hard conversations, but ultimately we believe the way we deliver business, those conversations become less and less because we really have a partnership with our clients. So we thank you for those words as well. Next slide, please. So I think this is also interesting for those that are exploring, CPQ for the first time. Also, those that are, have organizational needs that stretch, beyond even CPQ. So there's the product element. How do you really build a roadmap around Salesforce and the way you scale Salesforce across your organization, as well as just within CPQ. So, specifically, David, I know, you might have some goals that are coming now after CPQ that are really around how do you really maximize the value out of what you've just implemented? And maybe you can share that.
Yeah. So I think our mindset right now is very much or very little to do with like the next system. I mean, we have a lot to consume and digest with the system we just onboarded. And so what comes after CPQ is optimization, plain and simple. So here's how we approached it. We did our implementation. We instituted the entire infrastructure. So we were able to build all the knobs and dials and levers that would allow us to optimize the system. But we didn't actually start turning them. We just put in the system. And the reason why we did that was we wanted Q4 to be a benchmark. Okay, so under the new system, what is standard operating results? And now we're beginning to look back on it and see, surprisingly, actually some wins, because putting in those pipes actually does create structure. But now is when we start it gets interesting, right? So how do we think about our philosophy and our operations around discounting, right? Do the thresholds make sense? How do we, what deals do we want to take or not take? I mean, there's just a whole variety of conversations that we're now enabled to have that, quite frankly, before was bar talk, right? And now it's fact talk. So what comes after CPQ? CPQ.
I think that's a great answer. I think there's a way to foundationally approach an implementation. We hear, kind of crawl, walk, run, right? So how do you give realization to an organization quickly so it doesn't disrupt their organization or their business, but allows them to take advantages of this new implementation, of this new technology that they're going to be able to do to streamline their quoting process or streamline or optimize their business, right? So I think the way you approach the project is great. From Rob, from your perspective and Salesforce's perspective, obviously looking at Salesforce as a large entity, and I think there's over probably 43 different products, maybe even more. From your perspective, where do you see some clients really taking advantage of next steps after they've really optimized their CPQ process?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. I talked about it a bit towards the beginning and what Revenue Cloud as a whole that's grown kind of out of CPQ and billing into the newest cloud at Salesforce. But let's take a look at traditional CPQ use cases that we handle. On the subscription side, both selling a new deal, but also the more complex task of processing amendments and add-ons and upgrades and renewals and all those things. Plus, we have customers moving into a usage or consumption model. They're quoting pricing, but then after the customer consumes, they need to rate that consumption and bill for it. So we're naturally seeing customers coming to the point where their traditional billing models are not going to meet the needs of all of these different transaction types, whether they're one-time, perpetual software, percent of total, subscription, maybe professional services with milestone billing. All of these different revenue types are being sold on the same deals. And for the best customer experience, it naturally makes sense to bill accordingly. So many of our customers have started to evaluate the back end of this quote to cash process and identify that there really needs to be a better linkage between the front end CRM and CPQ solution and their back end ERP for fulfillment. And that's where Salesforce billing comes in to handle some of that automated invoicing, collections, and supporting of revenue recognition activities. Beyond that, customers are looking at all these different channels that they're quoting. It's not the B2B experience isn't always through a direct sales rep. Like I said, that partner channel, the ability to extend what your internal users or some element of what your internal users have access for configuring deals, pricing them out, and generating an output. Now your partner channel can do that directly. And what does that mean? Well, if your partner channel is potentially selling a couple different competing solutions, now they can quote yours in real time for their unique pricing and discounting practices and getting that out to the end customer immediately while they're on hold or shooting and have an email waiting in an inbox for some of the other vendors. So those are just some of the areas that our customers are naturally starting to look at next, but every conversation is different.
Well, thank you both for those answers, and I know that as questions arise, and you can reach out to your Salesforce AEs and Rob as well. I just want to say as we wrap up that David, it's really great that last year is one that we often will want to forget, but it's great to see something so great come out of that, and to have your business still growing at the rate that it's growing, succeeding, being able to have implemented in the middle of what was a traumatic year and what was COVID. Thank you for sharing your perspective and joining us here today. And Rob, we really appreciate you and Salesforce participating and giving us this platform as well for those to learn and then take action. I think that's the message that I'd like to leave folks with is this is a great year in front of us and time to take action for sure. So if there's anything else from David or Rob in closing remarks, I think we'll end this session.
I'd certainly, again, like to thank David for his time. There's been a lot of preparation, obviously, that's gone into this, and we really appreciate you speaking on our behalf. And Kyle, I'll throw one back at you. Customer success is the center of everything that we do at Salesforce, and it's only possible when our solutions are being supported and implemented by great partners like you that put the customer first. And it's been a great partnership aligning in that vision with Spaulding Ridge.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. You all make it easier as well, having a client like David and having a scalable platform and an excellent solution like CPQ. It's a fun ride for us. So thank you all. As more questions come in, we'll be sure to follow up directly as well. Our contact information's on this slide, and this will be available for on-demand viewing in short order. So everyone have a great rest of the week and weekend, and thank you again, and make the most out of 2021. Thank you.